Oh, good afternoon. To give a title for my talk, and so I just titled it "Christ should be the most practical way to live." No? Now, I did some statistics this morning for COVID, and here is the for as of yesterday, no, number of positive cases, and then I divided that by the population as of yesterday, and we have 1.27% of the population that's infected with COVID. Out of that, 1.75 deaths and 94.81% have recovered. If you do the math here, hindi yan mag 100 because there are still maybe people who are still sick. And at 1.27% of positive, I didn't realize 1.27 ang dami na, because at 1.27, how many people, your own families, your friends, relatives, etc., you really know that someone has been infected. And I myself, of course, I had COVID last year, and still struggling with long COVID. So with this, so much suffering. I had two uncles who passed away. I had some friends who, aside from that, next slide. If you look at the economy, I'm not very good with this, no? But what I did was I downloaded from Wikipedia the deaths of the Philippines. And then, since there was no chart, I went to Excel and I created my own chart. And you can see, no, that the death from 2019 to 2020 is almost, that's 2.2 trillion, no? It's almost equivalent to the accumulated increase in debt for 7 years. No? Grabe, no? So there's so much suffering. That's sort of the backdrop of, as I begin this sharing. And I had friends who started sharing with me, and they said, when this COVID happened, and then he also had COVID, no? After he recovered, he said he's been all that he's been doing is working. So he decided that he should do something different, that he should do things that he really wants. And so later or maybe I think I have it here, no? So later on, what he really want was he likes to detect for drop items. And so he would invite me to this Intramuros, and we would look for drop items for the National Museum. No, he's doing this as a volunteer. So whenever I'm free, I go with him. One afternoon, like here, there's a Spanish tunnel. No, it's very interesting. No, they're constructing the road, and then they hit this tunnel. No? And these are the items that we find. No, this is a musket ball. No, not basketball. Musket, yung baril, musket, from the Spanish era. No, and of course some bullets here, some buttons, military buttons, etc. No? So that's what he really enjoys. No, so instead of working all the time, he says he would like to spend some time, maybe once a week or so, doing that. No. So then the other friend of mine, he says, he's in he's close to his 60s, and he had COVID, and he was hospitalized in konti na lang, close to the ICU, no? And so he started talking to his friends, and he told me, not because of COVID and also because he's nearing 60, but it made him really think, life is really short, and what should we do with the remaining time that we have? we should spend it in some meaningful work, no? And so this topic about death, I'm just flashing to you my notes, no, so I won't forget what to say. This topic about death, even Steve Jobs, he says it very well in his commencement talk at Stanford. He said that death is the destination we all share. Death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. And these reflections of my friends came about because of COVID, no? Because of you're so near to death. And there's an exercise, there's a fantasy exercise where when you look, you are in your, I don't know, how do you call it? Deathbed na siguro, no? May sakit ka na, you're about to die. And when you look to your right, you already see the gates of heaven. Sana hindi naman hell, the gates of heaven. And nandiyan na si San Pedro. And then if you look to the left, you see your life flashing by and the remaining time that you have. And the question in this fantasy exercise is, what do you want to see at the time of death? What do you want to see? And most likely what you want to see is what you have to do, what you're called to do. It's most likely what brings meaning to your life. So this is at the point of death, no? That's why Steve Jobs says it's the very single best invention of life. And so when it comes to this meaning of life, what to do, how to live our lives, and then our topic of Christude, the attitudes of Christ, I'd like to start maybe from where I started thinking about this. No, let me move on a little bit here by sharing. No, with this topic about Christude, about Christ, I feel a bit uncomfortable because everyone has an experience of Christ, and I don't feel like that. I don't like to be preaching or anything. So I just want to share. I want to share my own thoughts about, yes, the attitude of Christ, but maybe I go one step back, and I place it in my title that it's the most practical way to live, no? Because I feel this is a very practical question of doing meaningful work, of living a meaningful life. And many times when we get inspired, we see people, no? We see people who we admire, who we idolize, who we imitate. And we ask why, why do we admire them? So in my training in physics, we're always asked to derive an equation. You're doing Newtonian mechanics, always derive it back to Newton's equations. F equals ma. From there, then you derive everything. And somehow, because of that discipline, I also started asking myself, more foundational things, and even for Christ, I started asking about Christ, questioning about Christ. And there's a formula here that was given to me during the retreats. It says that if you want to know more about yourself, first try to know Christ, because he's the perfect human being. So if you get to know Christ, then you will get to know yourself better and what you need to do. So uh, I'll start my sharing with, I think in the end I'll just post four reflections. No, I'll start my sharing with what happened to me during my younger years in my 20s. I was assigned to Mindoro. At the time, I wasn't happy that I was assigned to Mindoro. Because there was so much politicking in the office, and I was assigned to Mindoro, and that wasn't really part of my job. No? But then when I went up the mountain and I started talking to the Mangyans, I felt parang napahiya ako. Because they started telling me their stories, their problems, and their problems were like, life and death situation. Nagawa ng lupa, walang makain, this and that. And I felt so embarrassed because my problems were so petty. These were small office problems, siraan ng mga tao, inggitan, and then you get so caught up with it. I felt so embarrassed by that, And anyway, later on, I decided to leave the office and stay in Mindoro upon the invitation of the Mangyan. And this is what I did there, we would make these types of maps because the Mangyans couldn't read and write, and they wanted the government to recognize their ancestral lands, So let me go through this very briefly. This is my companion, Ray Bae. Together, we would teach the Mangyans how to make their maps. This is a session that we have. We bring the materials, and you can see some of the very traditional Mangyans here, Okay, so I became very culturally sensitive to the Mangyans, I said, okay, we're going to go there. So even to the extent na we wore Mangyan costume, and bahag, But somehow when the what do you call this? When the session started, ako lang nakabahag, And all the Mangyans were in Western clothes, mainly because during Christmas, we keep on giving the Mangyans clothes, di ba? We have no clothes. So, wala nang masyadong nagbabahag, And let me move on to this very quickly, unless you see something else, So we have a very large map. This is a topographic map, and they trace each line. And each line is one elevation, so they would cut it underneath. There's a piece of material. And this is a very good Mangyan. He is also the chef. And afterwards, they stack it. And then it forms the mountains, It forms the mountains. And from there, they can easily identify the extent of their ancestral lands. And we paint it, look like cardboard. Here is a large map. And they paint the land use or land cover. And then here the red dots here are their villages, and the red line is the extent of their ancestral domain. Here they're coloring their land cover. So I was teaching the students, doing different things. Here they wanted me to teach them about land, and since it's more mathematical, I had to make a trigonometric, physical trigonometric table, where you can get your sine and cosine. This one, teaching them how to do measurements. When I saw this, it was like an image of Christ, And here doing the actual measurements with the students in their lands. No, so those in Mindoro, no, and Ben Abadjano sent me this link this morning, and I was very surprised when I clicked on this. Turns out that that Pinoy went there in 2010. This was the time I was in the US, no? And this was in a place called Hagura in Occidental Mindoro. And we went there to this area to help them map out their ancestral domain at a time when the NPAs already threatened NGO at gunpoint and confiscated the GPS at the time. This was in the 90s when the GPS was still very rare. No? So I was very surprised. No, I didn't know about this, and Pinoy went there and awarded them their ancestral lands. Let me go back here. So I say this story mainly because when I share with some of my friends, some of them would say na, oh, siguro you're so happy, you're so satisfied because you've been helping this and that. But somehow, what happened to me was for 2 years I lived with the Mangyans, and then for about a decade I went back and forth to them. But after those 2 years, I went back to the city, to here in Manila, to continue my master's. And somehow when I went back one time to Mindoro, I felt a great emptiness. It's like everything that I did in those 2 years that while I was helping them, parang nag-back to zero, no? So parang when you look at how they live, you look at the health conditions, you know, I don't know, something was just amiss in me, and it kept haunting me. It kept on haunting me for a number of years until the voice became too loud that I could not take notice of it. Then I realized I had to listen to it. This was the point where I would say the hunter becomes the hunted. I don't know if you know about this story of by William Faulkner. It's so difficult with this with this arrangement because I cannot see the audience and I wouldn't know if the audience responds. No, so I'm just like talking to a box. William Faulkner talks about a bear by the name of Big Ben, and this bear would ransack the kitchen, would the farms, the barns, and would take the chickens and maybe kill, I don't know, pigs or whatever, and so the people were up to hunt Big Ben. So every year there would be a group that would try to look for Big Ben, but the thing is they never were able to catch Big Ben. And one day there was a kid who joined the group, and when he was at camp the first night, the dogs were barking, and there was a helper there. He was, I think, half Indian, half black, and the kid was saying, "What's that?" And the helper said, "Oh, that's Big Ben. He does that each year to see who's new. This Big Ben also observes the people." So since the kid was very young, the people would teach him how to use the compass, how to use the map, his rifle, etc., etc. But he did not see Big Ben. Only thing he saw that year was the footprint of Big Ben, and they knew that was the footprint of Big Ben because it had a crooked nail, And when the kid saw the footprint of Big Ben, it was like he already sees Big Ben. It was so real to him. Um, but no Big Ben, no. In the following year, they went back again, and the kid was very experienced already, and he knew what to do, but he still couldn't find Big Ben. And so he complains to the helper and he says, there's no Big Ben, it's not coming out. And the helper says, of course Big Ben will not come out. Why will he come out? He sees you, he knows you're there, he knows you've improved, and he knows you have a rifle. The only time Big Ben will come out is if you leave your rifle, if you don't have your rifle. So the kid continues, goes into the forest. He decides not to bring his rifle. He only took his compass and his stick to ward off the snakes because he wants to see Big Ben. And then he reached a point where he says, maybe what Big Ben really asked for is that he leaves everything behind. No? So even his compass, even if he'll get lost. And so he leaves it, and then he walks further into the forest. And there, after he leaves it, he sees Big Ben. There's a gap in the forest, a tree has fallen before, and there's some sunlight casting down, and he sees Big Ben there, sort of breathing heavily. But only at the side of his eyes, no? Because he's afraid that if he looks at Big Ben might do something to him or whatnot. And slowly he moves to look at Big Ben, and then Big Ben retreats into the darkness. So that's the time where the hunter becomes the hunted, and that's what I felt. No, I began questioning myself. No, and I realized that the answers will only be found in real silence. So. Okay, so let me begin here now. I say this because one of the characteristics that I'm listing here is self-knowledge. I'd like to believe that even Christ had to spend time to get to know himself. 40 days in the desert, no? And then after which he's tempted by the devil. So in my silence, I was basically asking, basic questions, no? It was a search for God, and basically it was God who was searching me, That's why I became so restless. And as I went through the retreat, I realized that I was too much in control of things, and I just had to let go. I spent 2 years, and I expect that my 2 years of serving the Mangyans would result in something significant. It's not my call, no. And so when I do serve, I do realize that it's just part of the bigger scheme, and then I have to put God in control. And so I let go. And when I do that, then I realize I'm liberated. When we work on the maps, it's like a learning from the maps, no? When we work on the maps, it takes a lot of effort to cut it, to put it together. And I noticed some of the participants become attached to the maps. Once the maps are done, they don't want other people to touch it. The maps are so big that you'll have to step on it. They don't want people to step on it because you become so attached to it. But the training that I had there was basically you give it your best shot, but afterwards you let go. You have to let go of it. Um, I feel like putting on this PowerPoint sort of makes my sharing not flow that well. What I wanted to list down are basically just for reflection. This is the first thing that I wanted to share. Not so much about characteristics of Christ, or attitude of Christ. I think, yeah, sorry, maybe there's some dissatisfaction there with my sharing. Not so much as to that Christ, we know about his truthfulness, his obedience, his loving, etc., etc. But I want to go back to that foundation, the foundation of Christ. And that foundation, I feel, was that of that 40 days in the desert of trying to discover himself. And when he knew after 40 days who he was, then his mission begins. So in trying to imitate Christ, I felt I too had to go through that time of searching, of listening, of quieting down, of getting to know myself better. And as it is said, the more you get to know Christ, the more you get to know yourself better, because then you will know what to do. Okay. Now, the second thing about Christ was that of awareness, which one can translate to the prayer life, the daily examen. It is in our silence that we see more clearly, And why is this important? Because something may happen during the day. It could be, maybe just for a split second. Maybe it's something you saw. Maybe it's a certain facial remark, or I don't know, anything. It could happen in just a split second. And if you don't quiet down, maybe that thing that was important, you lose it, If you quiet down and that thing is important, then you would magnify it, and it would create more space in you. So the daily examen is very important. I share with you one or two experiences. I was in the US, and I was teaching as part of I was studying and I was teaching at the same time. And it was my last year in the university in my PhD, and I've been teaching already for 4 semesters. I already knew how the pattern of student thinking, that they only want to get a grade of A. They're not really very interested in the course because these are non-science majors, and I also noticed that the students don't know each other. I'm teaching the lab, geology lab, and when the students come in the room, there are a few tables, and in whichever table you go to, that becomes your group mate, But at the end of the semester, I realized they don't know each other. So I told the students that I'm going to rotate them during the semester, and then I taught them, and then that was it, for the first day. A day or two later, I received an email from a student, and she said, she said, she's not good in science, she's having a difficult time, and if she can move to a different group, she doesn't like her group mates. And immediately, when I read her email, there was a tug in me, and I immediately responded to her, and I said, She was asking for advice, to write her or to talk to her about her problem. So I said, okay, let's talk on Friday. And we met on Friday. And normally, for the American students, teachers or TAs, the teaching assistant, if the students would say something, usually they follow. That's why it's very difficult in the US. The students have a very strong voice over the teacher. So if the students have difficulties, then the teacher will have to give in. So when I met her, I immediately told her that she cannot move to a different group. Immediately I saw that she was nagulat siya, parang, what? But then I continued my statement. I said, the day that you do not have a problem with your classmates, or with your group mates, then you can move. Then we started talking, and I told her that, I'm probably twice her age, and so I've probably seen life twice longer. And I said, I noticed that there are two important things in life. One's perspective and disposition. And these two things make a huge difference in life. And sometimes I'd see old people and they don't still see it, and they just miss out. No? So one's perspective is how you see reality, how you see life, and one's disposition is how you take it. So we talked for maybe, I don't know, an hour. And she was listening very, very intently. And then later on, she said, what you're telling me is not only true for geology in my class. She started reflecting about her life. No? So anyway, the following week, we had classes again, and the other students were done. She was the last one to submit her exercise, and she apologizes for that. And I said, no, it's fine. It's the bell hasn't rang, and she said, because I'm poor in science, that's why I'm so slow. I said, it's okay. And then I asked her how was the day, how was the class? And to my surprise, she says, it went well. I said, what happened? She said, well, she said she decided to ask her classmates for help, and they helped her. And apparently they were very helpful people. So I guess what happened in the first week was she was trying to show them that she was having difficulties, but she never asked for help. And now she decided to reach out to ask for help, and then she realized that they were such nice people. So her agony didn't last that long. No? I forgot to mention that in the email, I did tell her, because I did tell the class, because students just want to get an A. I said that good experiences are delightful, but difficult experiences bring growth. And that was sort of the backdrop when I was talking to her. Because if I had allowed her to simply move to a different group, then I wasn't helping her. Because then she would just be running away from her problems, which is basically herself. So anyway, I guess by doing the examen, it helped me see that more clearly, what was going on in her, and without that, then I would have missed out. So if I look to Christ, he was always praying, no? And pray, I don't know. If you really try to pray, it takes so much effort. It really takes so much effort to pray. It's not easy. It's not easy to silence oneself, and to listen. You try doing it and you realize that there's a lot of noise. You'll be thinking about something else, and you have to silence that so that you can really listen. Listen to your heart, listen with your heart. And what is the fruit of prayer? I wrote it here. What is the fruit of prayer? The fruit of prayer is love, no? Now, here's another example of how I listen, how it sort of, how the Spirit sort of tugged in me as I listen through. And sometimes it's a small tug, sometimes it's a very huge tug. And in this case, it was very powerful. I was assigned to Sulu, and at the time I didn't realize how dangerous it was. It was a few years after what was her name? The Burtons were kidnapped. Not a whole lot of kidnapping yet, but there were some. And I was asked to help in looking for clean water for the communities. Here's an example of a dug well, and you can see this kawayan here, no? This bamboo coming down here, if I'm not mistaken. Oh no, this is not a kawayan. It's just a twig here. Oh, here maybe. No, they would take water here and drink it. And the rule of thumb is anything that's open is prone to contamination. And so this for sure is a contaminated well. And if you look at their water sources, it's all like that, no? And here we are doing some measurements, trying to find clean water for the people. The community we lived in, and this is the bacteriological testing of their water sources. I think 98% of the water sources are contaminated, at least of what we've tested. Now, let me see. Yeah, 98%. Now, this was over a decade ago, and we were going around here, and we stayed for a long time here in Panglima Estino. And by that time, I realized I was going to go to the US, and so I was hurrying up. And it was already December of 2006. By January of 2007, I would be in a plane and headed for the US. And we still had this island of Pata to survey. So I went to this island, and there are a few sitios here, and I told the community organizer that if a community doesn't want help, then don't bother anymore, no? Because we're going to do a survey there. And if they're undecided, it's as good as a no. There's no more time to talk to them, to convince them. We're just going to do communities that wanted it. So we did all of the communities on this southern side, because this is the side of the MNLF, while the northern side is the side of the government. And they skipped one community, the community of Sangkap-Higad, because they were undecided. Then I went back to the US. A year after, in 2008, I came back, and there was a request for us to look into Estino. And when there was a night more, they said, maybe we can go here to Pata, no? So we went back, and I said, which community are we visiting? And they said, Sangkap-Higad. I said, why are we visiting Sangkap-Higad? They were the community that weren't prepared. And as it turns out, in the year that I was in the US, there was a leader here by the name of Saldi, who went to the big island of Mindanao, and that was the time where war was going on, no, in central Mindanao. And when he sat together with the people, and they didn't realize he was an MNLF warrior, he just listened to the people, and they didn't know who he was, and he heard all their broken dreams, and and somehow he felt that the war that he's been fighting for isn't going anywhere. And all of a sudden, he had a very deep desire for peace. So when he went back to Pata Island, he he's not the leader of the entire Pata Island. No? He's just the leader of a small sitio. He told his people to remove the landmines, because the landmines form their fence against the northern part, which is the government side. And he said, no more landmines. Then he started looking for programs, started contacting our group, Tabang Mindanao, for education, for health, for water. Because of the water, then that was the reason I was asked to come here. No? And then when I heard about that, I was deeply moved. No, I said, wow. So this is Saldi. It's the guy here. And this is 2008. I went up there, and then we were trying to look for their water source. And then we went down. We only had just a few hours that day, and I told him, we'll go back and help them. Now, before we left, of course, we prayed in the mosque and all. But before we left, I told him I wanted to leave a message with him. And by the time, it's been a year of not practicing my tausug, so I was really rusty. But I didn't want to speak in Tagalog, so I tried my best to speak in tausug. And I told him that for many years, although I haven't been in Sulu for many years, the years that I've been in Sulu, I've been thinking, when will peace come to them, no? to these islands? The war has been going on for so long. And it seems like there are different approaches to it. The military will have their approach of how to bring peace. Some NGOs would build hospitals or schools. Others would build roads, water systems, etc. And yet, even if these were placed in Sulu, I told him I still don't see peace. They build a health center, but who's in there? It's a family who's living in there. There are no students in the schools. The roads are being bombed. I don't see peace. But today, in front of me, I told him, I see and I feel peace in you. And so I told him, please guard that peace, because it's very easy to lose it. And we'll be back. We'll be back to help you. And that experience was so strong. It spoke so strongly in me that for the entire time that when I was in the US, that was flaming alive. So much so, 10 years after that, I think this was 2 years ago, I had an opportunity of going back to Sulu. But by this time, there sobra ng gulo. And somehow there was an opportunity to go with the Marines to Pata Island. And so we went, and there I went back for the second time, and here dressed in a Muslim attire, trying to look for water for them. No, But then after this, my mom got sick, and then COVID came out, so I wasn't able to return. But this experience for me spoke so strongly that I cannot but help listen to it and go for it. The third one, when I look at the foundations of Christ, it was said that if you really want to know Christ, then try to understand the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount, because that's the Magna Carta of Christ, the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm sure you guys know this very well. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger, the merciful, etc., etc. And I think I said this before, no? In my summary of the Beatitudes, parang swerte ka kung malas ka. Parang ganyan. Swerte ka kung malas ka. You mourn, you're meek, you're hungry. Diba parang, kawawa ka naman, malas ka. But you're swerte. And this was given to me as one of the prayer times during the retreat, no? And I was trying to understand what it means. And I'm very slow, no? I'm very slow in prayer, and my spiritual advisor would say, John, you're very slow, but that's your pace. So it took me a long time until I began to think about the Mangyans. And that experience with the Mangyans helped me understand the Beatitudes. I'll give you maybe two examples of, maybe 2 or 3 examples of what happened. There were Filipino Chinese from Kaisa who were interested to help set up schools in Mindoro. So they went for a visit, and they brought a lot of bread, no? And they saw that there was a kid who was. They saw a kid there, so he gave the kid a piece of bread. He didn't realize that this was the time that the kids were hungry, no? And what the kid did was he ran away and looked for the other kids, and he broke the bread and he gave it to another kid. And then this other kid also broke the bread again and gave it to another kid, until almost each one of them has the same morsel of bread before they eat. And so this guy was sharing it to me, and he said, grabe, bilib ako sa mga bata doon, kasi if he were probably to give it here in Manila, one kid would run away and just eat it by himself, no? But he said, yeah, they share it. And then there was one time where there was a teacher from Ateneo going for an exposure trip, and he didn't know that this was the time of famine. Because there would be times in Mindoro, pag tinamaan ng bagyo, lahat ng kaingin, sira. So there's no food. And of course, the teacher, in his backpack, is a lot of canned goods. But of course, the Mangyan didn't know, no? And all he had, I think, were a few pieces of mangoes. The Mangyan, thinking that the teacher's also hungry, gives maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 of his mangoes, half of his mangoes, to the teacher, because he knew that the teachers were there to help them. And when the teacher was sharing, he was telling me about what happened. No? Parang naiiyak siya na, parang how can they give knowing that they only have so little. And also with the Mangyans, no, when the NPAs come and they're injured, the Mangyans still take care of them. That's why at times the military think that they're NPA as well. But the Mangyans would tell us na, may sakit, may sugat. How can they just leave them and not take care of them. So then I realized that it's the poverty, because they know what it feels. They know what it feels to be hungry. They know what it feels to suffer. That when someone is hungry, when someone is suffering, they reach out. And it's these things, yung parang malas, those are the things that really teach us how to love. Because we can then feel for the other. And if I look to this beatitude, to this Magna Carta, everything is basically teaching us how to love. In I think that's a pinaka gist of it, no? Now the last thing that I'd like to include is the agony in the garden. It was said that if you have to make an important decision, take a day or two to reflect on the scene on the agony in the garden. Sometimes, like my dad would talk about business, and then he'd start counting, oh, ito yung cost, ito yung kita, etc., etc. Oh, very good business. We should get into this business. It's all looking at the positive side, but not on the difficulty side. Unless you get into it, and then you end up with a lot of trouble, and then you say, "This is not what I bargained for." But I feel that this is so important, the agony in the garden. I feel that the way to the cross, the crucifixion, wouldn't have happened without this. This is the turning point. This is the turning point of that decision of Christ. So once he decides yes, then the way to the cross is just a consequence of this decision. And so, I don't know, important decisions, getting married, opening a new business or whatever, getting to a project, a new job, or whatever decision, you go through the agony in the garden, and realize that it's not all the nice things that you're looking at, that there will be suffering, and whether you still gain for it. And the other thing is, aside from that decision, is that what he offers at the very end is his will, no? And that will is basically what makes us human. That's why even in the prayer of Ignatius, but at the very end is the will that he offers to Christ, no? So I recall when on our second year in Sulu, we were going to stay put and do these resistivity surveys. They take a lot of time. Unlike the first year where we were just going around, and usually it's a surprise visit to the community, and so the Abu Sayyaf wouldn't know where we were, no? But that second year, we're going to spend a longer time in the community, and so it's very easy to locate us. And I was telling my teammates, I said, by the time there were only two of us, in the beginning there were three of us, I told Benji, Benji, before we leave for Sulu, maybe you'd like to take a day to reflect on the agony in the garden. And then he, of course, he didn't understand what I was talking about, so I explained it to him. And then I said, Benji, this time we're going to spend so much longer in one site. and many things can happen. And what if something happens? Would that be the time that you would start reflecting, what am I doing? Why am I here, and all that? So maybe we have to reflect earlier, so that if it does happen, then you're prepared already. We're prepared already. And when we were there, then the AFG started looking for us. One day, we were working so late, and then we set up a tent. Our tent was green, and that morning they passed by. They didn't notice our tent because it was green, but they were looking for us. And the community told them that we were down the hill, but actually we were up the hill. So when I realized that, when the community realized that we were up the hill, actually up the hill, because they didn't realize we were sleeping in the tent. Then they panicked, and then they called the elders. Then the leader told us to enter his house, which was just a bahay kubo. And both Benji and I were seated in the house, in the bahay kubo. And since Benji was a ROTC commander, he knew how to hold guns. I didn't know how to hold guns. So he was whispering to me. He said, "Give me a gun, give me a gun." Well, I was telling myself, going through that agony in the garden, I told myself, "Oh Lord, maybe this is it." No? But luckily, even the AFG were afraid of the mayor, and the community also banded together, so that if they were to come back, then they would fight it off. No? But when they went down, dalawa lang kasi sila, and they were going to come back with more people. They came down, one with a big Chris, no? Then one with the Armalite. So, of course, one doesn't have to be as dramatic as in that sense, but I feel that the agony in the garden and the awareness of how we use, how we give up our will, no? That's basically our freedom. It's so intrinsic, so important to us. I don't know how many minutes I've been sharing already. I think that all of these things are sort of encapsulated in Ignatius's principle and foundation. Here he says we were created to praise, reverence, and serve God, and by doing so save our soul. But all of these is to fulfill the reason for which we were created, which is to love. No? And so God created all other things, the face of the earth, to help us fulfill this purpose. And this purpose is basically to love. So sometimes we ask ourselves, no, I went through this long process, maybe for the younger people, no? I went through a very long process of trying to figure out, what is God's will for me? What should I do? What's the meaning of life, etc., etc. Now, I don't have to be original in all of this. The reason why we were created is that we were created out of love, and so our reason to be on this earth is to love. No? And God is love, and so the Beatitudes and all of those, no, you can try to see that everything is being formed, no, how to love, and from this it follows that we are to use the things of this world only to the extent that they may help us to this end, which is to love, or we ought to rid ourselves of these things of this world to the extent that they get in our way of this end. So we use our gifts. We use our gifts to help us love. And if these gifts are not helping us, then we don't use them. And this last part is where we talk about the spiritual indifference. No, for this it is necessary to make ourselves indifferent to all created things as much as we are able, so that we are not necessarily that we do not necessarily want health rather than sickness, riches rather than poverty, honor rather than dishonor, long life rather than short life, etc., etc. So, of course, if you were to ask someone, do you want to be rich or poor? Someone would say immediately, I want to be rich. You want to have a good life or bad life? Of course, I want to have a good life. But for Ignatius, just like Christ, he was indifferent to this. Just look at the scene on the 40 days in the desert, temptation of the devil. That was the point when Christ was already exhausted, 40 days fasting. You can try to put it in your own context, like in my context. I'm so hungry now, no? You can become irritable. I'm so stressed, I become irritable, and then you're suddenly put to the test. And there are 3 tests, diba? Turn the stones into bread, no? Sa Pilipinas, yung bread, kwarta, diba? So use your talents to cash it out, no? And he says, man does not live on bread alone. So he becomes indifferent to it. Then the second one was you go up and then you fall, and then the angels will catch you. So it's an image of try to make a show, be popular. Sikat ka. And he said, what does he say? He just not put God to the test. So the first one was money, second one was fame. And the third one was what really caught me, no? Because they go up and then they see everything, and then the devil says, you bow down and all of this will be yours, just bow down and worship me. And then he tells the devil to go away. And that for me was what caught me, because all of these things basically were saying, make myself the center of the universe. It's all about me. Sometimes you think about sin. I'm not a big sinner. But that's selfishness. That me, always me first. That was the third thing. No? All of these are yours. Just bow down and worship me. And that was what will hinder me from loving. This is myself, my selfishness, myself. So put this in the context of what Ignatius is saying, is that I don't choose. I don't. Sometimes I have to be famous in order to promote or to love. Sometimes I don't have to. Sometimes a mother chooses, a parent chooses immediately bad health when the baby is out. Doesn't even have to think. Chooses bad health. Umiyak yung baby at 3 o'clock in the morning. You choose good health, I'll sleep na lang. Bahala na yung baby. You don't do that. So one doesn't always choose good health. Sometimes one would choose bad health. Sometimes one would have to choose dishonor because one has to be truthful, etc., etc. And the only time that you choose, if it's for the greater glory of God. And maybe I'd end with, this is my favorite passage in the Bible. Usually this second part here is quoted for weddings. But I like the first part here. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong. or a clanging cymbal. No, kahit anong ganda ng boses mo, sweet talking, but there's no love, sakit pa rin yan. You immediately sense it, no? You're sweet talking, but there's no love. If I have gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, so for me these days, kung anumang talino mo, you're a PhD, you have, all the science, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, I'm nothing. Wala pa rin. And if I give all I possess to the poor and give all my body the hardship that I may boast, so whatever, kahit ano pang paghihirap mo, you give everything, but there's no love, then I have gained nothing. So all of these, for me, the foundational thing, when we talk about the attitude of Christ, everything flows towards, in the end, of using our lives to love. I was thinking, in the context of a company, so many of I work with small groups. In small groups, sometimes there's friction. It's even larger groups. It's very difficult, no? And sometimes people start talking, but hopefully, when we start criticizing other people, hopefully we only do that out of concern. That there should be it still should be out of love. The reason why I'm saying this is because of out of concern, deep concern for the individual, and not simply put the person down. So maybe I end there with my summary. The importance of self-knowledge. Mind you, I didn't go to saying about one time there was an interview by a student from Xavier School telling me what message should I give to the students. And parang gas-gas na, you see that, to serve, to for those who have been given much, much is expected of you, etc., etc. Parang I feel that the more you know yourself, then you would know what to do. Then these things are just a consequence of self-knowledge. But the problem is that self-knowledge, it's ang hirap eh. It's a continuous search then of knowing oneself. The same way that Christ had to go through that as well. And that's possible through that awareness, to that level of prayer, of silence, of continuously, on a daily basis, examining your day, not for faults, no? You can examine each day, like, what the feel of the spirit, no? How it's moved, no? In a positive or negative way. And then trying to drill down, what was the cause? What's the root of that? Maybe it's saying something important. Then, of course, the Magna Carta of Christ. And my summary for that is suerte ka kung malas ka. Sometimes this is the difficulty when we try to protect others too much. Maybe children, sometimes my students, they end up not making the mistakes, or not getting hurt, or not, and so we deprive them of that learning, because of too much protection. So like that student who wanted to move to a different group, I had to say, no, you cannot. The only time you can is when you don't have a problem with them. When to give in, when not to give in. These days with COVID, I also noticed it's not just getting sick, not just financial problems, psychological problems, mental health. It's probably at the rise. My students alone, when I ask them, just to share how they're doing, I can sense from what they're sharing that they're going through depression. No? So one student wasn't able to finish the course, and what do I do? No? Do I flunk that student? Bagsak na nga. Flunk pa, and he's thinking maybe it's not going to study anymore. And so I asked him what's going on, no? And through his reply, sure enough, this guy is going through depression. So instead of flunking I tell him, can I? It's like because he doesn't, he can't bring himself to do things. It's like when exercising is good for you, but if you're alone, you don't want to exercise. But if your buddy comes in and says, swim time, and you don't want to, but your body's there, then you go out and swim. So I told him, can I be your buddy for 2 weeks? I'll call you every other day, check up on you. And then you can tell me, what you want to do, and so you'll target it, and I'll check up on you. If you have difficulties, we can discuss it. And now he's working on the exercises now. So luckily he responded. And then the last one would be the agony in the garden, which for me is also very, very important. So I did not put much emphasis on the corporation, and no. This basically for me is my own sharing. I'm sure you have your own as well, no? Or maybe if you want to apply what I shared to your context, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to do that as well. So it's a very awkward arrangement for me. I can see the person I'm talking to, and I also can see the clock. But I think that's where I end my talk, my sharing.
Thank you, John.
You.
I'm listening. I'm always here.
Yeah.
Hello, John. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. John Ong. We may be in small boxes because of Zoom, but it was definitely an inspiring and insightful message. Like what Mr. Nang said, we have listened to your stories, and how you lived your life, and how you helped the Mangyan. So thank you very much for that inspiring message. So now, to facilitate our next segment, may I invite our Organization Development Officer, Mr. Jello Poho. Jello, take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Laurice. And once again, thank you, Mr. John Ong. Wow, what can I say? What an adventure-filled life. So meaningful, so many things to learn from, and very inspiring. So thank you so much, Mr. John Ong, for that. And before anything else, I'm very sure our community here have comments or questions to ask you. We'd like to deepen the discussion by asking you our questions. So we have panelists on hand right now. And the first panelist I'd like to introduce is Ms. Marian Alfaro. She is the Quantity Survey Officer from the Land Investment Unit. So, hi, Ms. Marian. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, JNG. Good afternoon, Sir Jello. Good afternoon, Sir John Ong.
Good afternoon.
Ayun, Ms. Marian, no? So,
Yes,
would
sir.
you have any comments or questions for sir?
Sir, I'm thankful po dun sa mga personal experiences na shinare niyo po sa amin. May lang po ako, may one question po ako sana. Masasabi po ba natin na can we follow or be like Christ or know Christ without reading the Bible? Or being a good person or knowing Him only in what we hear or feel about Him and enough to say that we follow or know Him?
I think it's important. Definitely, no. I think it's important. If you want really to know Him, how will you know Him? you go through the written source, which is the Bible, um, and then you can also talk to other people, no? Because there are things that you might miss out. For example, no, I'll give you an example, no. So I was going through a retreat, and in the retreat, these are silent retreats, no. Medyo mahirap because you're asked to pray 5 hours a day. 5 hours, it's a lot of work. I told you, praying is a lot of work, no. 5 hours a day. So you space it out, no. In the morning, tapos break ka ng konti, 5 hours. And there are some passages that even if I go to mass, sometimes I never really noticed. And then it was given as an exercise. For example, I'll give you an example. Because this was part of one of my exercises. When it says when John the Baptist says, "I should decrease and he should increase," because that was what caught me during the prayer time. But parang when I shared to other people, sometimes they said, sa Bible ba yan? Actually, it's in the Bible, you know. And that for me was very significant, you know. During my prayer time, I focused so much on that. I should decrease, you know, my ego, my selfishness should decrease, so that Christ can increase. And another example would be when you go through the scriptures. Let's say the it's a gospel, no. You read about the breaking of the bread in the three gospels, pero pagdating kay John, wala. And what he gives is the washing of the feet. Kay John ba yun? Kay John yata yun. Baka pwede ako i-correct niya, no? Ni Terence, huh? But one of the gospel gives the washing of the feet, no? So which then tells me how what Jesus is teaching is really the service, no? But of course your question also poses na if you're not, I don't know, if you're not Catholic, if you're not Christian, then of course you wouldn't be able to go through the Bible, no. What I'm saying is that the tradition is so rich, why not benefit from it? Parang sometimes even when you kasi ako nasa academe, no, mahilig sa academe magano parang bago ito, no, this is the first time, this is novel, mga ganyan. You want to write in their journals to submit to for referee na this is and sometimes we want to be like that. We want to be parang this original idea. But for me, no, I've been searching, etc. Parang I realize I don't have to be original. Why not take something already that's already there? And for me, the principle and foundation, which Ignatius stated, after reflecting on it for so long, it becomes so clear, and I tell myself, my goodness, how was Ignatius able to see this so clearly? So clearly. And it enriches my life so much. No, I don't have to be original. The things that I've shared, wala naman original, no. I saw one clip kay Tagle. Ano bang title ni Tagle niya? Si Bishop Cardinal? Saying na, nung Holy Week, no, sinasabi niya, wala namang bago. Ulit-ulit lang. Wala kailangan bago. No, so I just feel that if you're really intent in trying to know someone, you'd search everything. You'd go to the internet, you'd search something. For example, may nag-in ngayon sa social media, and you got interested. What do you do, di ba? The first thing you do, you Google search the person's name, and then you try to know. And if you really get fascinated with Christ, I'm pretty sure you would read up on Christ, no? You know, I don't know of any single person in this world where the entire axis of the world pivoted, changed. The entire history changed because of one person. Try to think of what happened with Christ, no? Sobra yung look at your names, di ba? Marian, you look at the school, lahat, everything you go around is related to him. The ideas of justice, of freedom, of democracy, etc. Revolves around this one person. It's just too much. And so if he says, come follow me, who wouldn't want to come and follow him? Who wouldn't want to be part of this yung game plan niya, no? When he talks about the kingdom of God, diba? What is this kingdom of God? Of course, it's a kingdom of love. It's a kingdom of love. So take for example, I was talking to this student of mine, and I see, I see so much na this guy is in depression. What will I do? Give him an F? And then after that, parang he's contemplating na he's not going to study anymore. Or I take the other route. Can I be your buddy? And at that time, it's like having a glimpse of the kingdom of God.
Thank you, sir. Bali kasi, sir, nagdaan din ako sa through depression po dati. So, I tumakbo po ako dun sa Bible po talaga. For for clarity ng self, sa mind, sa soul. So, hanggang ngayon parang yun po yung nagiging ang tawag dito, parang foundation ko po para sa sarili ko at para rin po maging instrumento po para sa iba. Thank you, Sir John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marian, for the question and for sharing something about your experience. Thank you so much. So up next, our next panelist is Mr. Rio Benitez. He is the Commission Accounting Officer from the Property Development Unit. Hi, Sir Rio. Good afternoon and welcome.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon po ulit. And thank you, Sir Jello. And good afternoon po sa JNG, JNG family, and Sir John Ong po. Thank you po sa napakaraming experiences na kinento niyo po at sa lahat-lahat. Yung question ko po is something related about dun sa COVID reviews na shown niyo po sa amin kanina. Ito. How can you encourage people to feel excited for the future? Yung future po na wala na tong pandemic. Kasi po 'di ba, isipin natin, when you feel excited about the future, you want to be part of it. And if you want to be part of it, you will do your part to be there as soon as possible. Yun po. Paano po makaka-encourage ng mga tao na maging excited na sa panahon na tapos na yung pandemic? Yung parang ganun. Yung po yung question.
Sorry, hindi ko masyado naunawanan. Paano maging excited sa panahon na tapos na?
Paano mo po ma-encourage yung mga tao na parang ma-imagine nila or maging excited sila dun sa panahon na wala ng pandemic? Di ba po kapag kasi halimbawa, kunyari ay yung graduation, di ba? Tapos na yung paghihirap mo sa eskwelahan, ganun, iniisip mo yung graduation. Di ba po excited ka sa graduation? Paano mo ma-encourage yung mga tao na maging ganun po yung mindset nila during this time na pandemic? Parang ganun po.
These are the difficult times, di ba? yung financial nga pinakita nga sobra yung pag-utang. Paglabas mo sa kalsada, kita mo maraming naglilimos, alam mo maraming naghihirap. But then at the same time, kita mo rin a lot of goodwill, di ba? Yung mga pantries, community pantries. I think, para sa akin kasi, ang hirap, hindi ko alam kung anong mangyayari. You have the Delta variant na ang Australia nag-lockdown, di ba? Nakalusot. I don't know what the new normal will be. Paano maging excited?
Yung time na tapos na yung pandemic.
Na
Di ba po, halimbawa,
Oo.
Yung iisipin natin tapos na yung pandemic, yung point na yun, yung mindset is, nandun na tayo sa tapos na yung pandemic. Para, di ba po kasi halimbawa, ngayon, mga wala pang, yung iba takot pa magpa-vaccine, mga ganyan. Di ba, yun po yung part is the solution na para makarating tayo dun sa end point ng pandemic.
Hindi ko pa
encourage
Hindi ko pa masyado naisip itong tanong, pero ikaw dahil naisip mo, baka ikaw meron kang masabi.
Bali, yun sa akin lang po kasi is naihalin tulad ko po kasi itong quarantine dun sa kwento sa Bible about kay Noah po. Di ba po sila sa isang barko lang, ganun. Then, yung portion niya na gumawa siya ng act para malaman kung tapos na ba yung baha is, di ba inutusan niya po yung ibon, ilang beses niyang pinalipat, di ba, para i-check kung may part na ba ng earth na pwede silang dumaong, ganun. Hindi lang siya yung nag-aantay na matatanaw ko lang na, uy, may land na doon, pwede na tayo doon dumaong. Di ba po, gumawa siya ng act sa sarili niya para malaman kung pwede na nga silang dumaong, kung may solusyon na. Yun, parang ganun po. Parang gusto kong makapag-encourage ng tao na isipin natin yung endpoint ng pandemic ito. Yung maging excited ka dun sa dulo ng pandemic para gawin mo yung part mo habang nandito ka sa hard times na to po. Yung parang ganun. Kasi pag excited ka sa future, gusto mong maging part nun, then yun, mag-iingat ka, parang ganun. Yung ganun. Yung future na wala ng pandemic. Gusto ko makapag-encourage ng mga tao na ganun po. Yung mindset nila, kahit mahirap. Parang ganun.
Siguro kapag, yung ang bahagi mo, no, nakikita mo na merong naghihirap at hindi lang naghihirap, pati yung mentally na nasi-stress sila, na depression dahil sa mga nangyayari. Siguro biyaya yan na nasa iyo na ang paghanap ng paraan na paano sila mapabuhay. Paano umangit yung spirit nila, no? Sa iba't ibang paraan siguro marahil, no?
Okay. Thank you, Sir Rio, for that question. So basically, I think what I got from that is we're all excited for this pandemic to end. We all want to see our loved ones again. Diba? I myself have loved ones who live not so far away, but I haven't seen them since the start of 2020. And getting what I learned from Mr. Ong's reaction is that if we want to achieve that goal, we must start not thinking of ourselves, but thinking of those around us. Diba? Getting vaccinated is one way, but also caring for those who are having trouble right now. Instead of just focusing so far ahead, we ask ourselves, what can we do right now to lead all of us out of this pandemic? Diba? So thank you, Mr. Ong, and thank you, Rio, for sharing that question. And so our last panelist is Miss Jackie Capito. She is the Organization Logistics Assistant from the Resource Management Unit. Hi, Miss Jackie.
Hi, good afternoon to all, and good afternoon, Sir John Ong, Sir Jello. Thank you, Sir John Ong, for the inspirational experience you've shared today to us. For me, we all know that God's love and compassion are foundationally different to the love of others. God longs to establish relationship on the building blocks of His love and grace. As His people, lalo na po ngayong pandemic time, how can we able to influence and teach the following generation to walk in compassion, to have a heart of compassion towards other people?
No, I think yung mga nasabi ni Jello kanina, maybe I can also add, I've said it a number of times now, I'm just going to repeat myself. It's about the face of Christ. There's a modern philosopher by the name of Levinas, and his philosophy has to deal with the face. For those who studied in Ateneo, this is part of our philo of moral foundations. And I was, at that time, if you're under Eddie Boy Calasanz, talagang takot na takot ka. Kasi siya yung teacher na nagbibigay ng grade ng G yata G. No, mas mababa pa sa F, no? And so I learned this from that class, no? And in the history of it was asking, what is the origin, what is the root of sin? Kaya naman nagkakasala ang tao. And there were different philosophers who tried to deal with this problem. And mga iba, sabi, if you cannot universalize it, then may problema. If it's only good for one but not for all, bakit merong exemption dito? Ay, may mali dyan. Mga lusot-lusot dyan. Bakit yung mga privilege lang, mga lusot, may problema dyan. Until you reach to this modern day philosopher, Emmanuel Levinas, and he says, when you fail to see the face of the other, then that is where sin lurks. And how is this so? In the Filipino modern day example would be yung naglilimos sa sasakyan, and then ang sagot, ano bang sagot pag ayaw mong bigyan? Anong sagot? Tok, ganyan. But in the past, ang sagot ay patawad po, patawad. And the Filipino says patawad po. Bakit? Yung naglilimos ay mas mababa sa'yo, pero nung naglimos, biglang ikaw mas mababa. Ikaw ang humihingi ng patawad. And the reason for that is kasi nakita mo na yung mukha. Pag hindi nakita yung mukha, nasa loob ka ng bahay, yung katulong ang nasa pintuan, sir, may naglilimos. Ay, hindi, wala. But if you're the one in the door, patawad po. You said patawad po. Because of the face. The face has parang it commands you parang it forces you to respond to it. Once you see the face, it's very difficult. Once you see the face of suffering right in front of you, it's very difficult not to respond. That's why for the Mangyans, diba? They've seen it and then it's in front of them. How will you not respond? Especially once you felt it already before, how is it possible that you will not respond? So, and then later on, you tie this to Christ, where he says, I was hungry, I was naked, I was thirsty, I was in jail. Then you visited me. Then we realize that those are actually the face of Christ. And so during itong, not just during itong pandemic, but especially during the pandemic, if you have more, what you can give, then you share, diba? And you try to also be protective of others by protecting yourself, etc. So just wanted to share about the face ng Levinas.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. John Ong. And thank you also to our panelists, Miss Marian, Sir Rio, and Miss Jackie. And before we continue, I'd like to present Mr. John Ong with this certificate of appreciation. So let me read it aloud. The certificate of appreciation is hereby awarded to Mr. John Burtkenley Ong as our joyful tribute and appreciation for sharing your presence and expertise with us and for sparkling light, hope, and love in our Joy-Nostalg Culture Day Mind session. May you always continue to be the light that sparkles and shines ever so bright, creating moments of happiness and memories of hope for others. Spark Joy, moreover, awarded this first day of July in the year of our Lord 2021. Signed, Ms. Jocelyn Labrador, Chief Executive Officer of the Resource Management Unit, and Mr. Jacinto Sinang Jr., Group Executive Officer of the Joy-Nostalg Group.
Thank you.
So once
Thank you,
again,
John.
yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much, John.
You're welcome.
So, guys, all the pictures that John has shown you are the ones that are quite fascinating. But I hope they will also remind you the stories and the insights that he has shared uh, as they are very much meaningful, and personally, it has touched me in many ways. So thank you very much, John, for sharing these stories this time to everybody. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Ong, and
John. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. John Ong, and we hope to have you soon again with us. Very inspiring. We learned a lot from your life experience. Thank you, Mr. Ong.